So I'm really pleased to be with you here all today and to have the chance to talk with all of our speakers. My name is Lindsay Nelson. I'm with Great Place to Work Institute, and we're just down the street. We are the people best known in the United States as being the people behind the Fortune list, and also work with companies to help them assess and improve their workplace cultures. So we also spend a lot of time getting to know the best companies to work for and learning from them about what they're doing and how that's setting them apart from other companies. So we have three great companies with us today. And our speakers are Lori Goler, sitting in the middle there, is the Vice President of Human Resources and Recruiting at Facebook. Lori is responsible for all aspects of Facebook's people strategy. And before she was with Facebook, she was with eBay, leading consumer marketing. Before that, she was a founding member of BabyStyle.com and worked in strategy and business planning at the Walt Disney Company as well. We also have Michael Morell. Michael is a founder and managing partner at Riviera Partners. Riviera Partners is an executive search firm specializing in technology organizations, and Michael focuses on recruiting VP and C-level talent in engineering and in product management. And then finally, we have Krista Foley here on the left. Krista is the recruiting manager and recruiter at Zappos. Krista joined Zappos in 2004 and leads Zappos' recruiting team in scouring the planet for people who are fun and a little weird. She sees her team's role at Zappos as preserving and protecting the Zappos culture. And Zappos is also one of the companies that is on the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list, is number 6 this year. So the first question I wanted to ask each of you is, if we're thinking about role fit and culture fit, how do you weigh those two?
Well, I think that in a lot of cases, CEOs are the foundation and the reason a culture exists. So once a CEO decides to found a company, the culture exists in that CEO. I think the challenge or the mistake that a lot of times people make in that role is that they haven't done a very good job of defining what that culture is. So until you define the culture and make that culture transparent to the people that you're trying to bring in, it's very tough to kind of make determinations. I think I would say 90+% of the searches that we do for executive level talent as well as individual contributors, 9 times out of 10, the cultural piece of the equation weighs most heavily in the decision of the hiring manager. Somebody with a computer science degree from a solid school with 4 to 5 years of experience typically has the technical capabilities to do the job. In a lot of cases, it's the intangibles and primarily the culture that is the most important. So I think as CEOs look to bring on executives as well as individual contributors, I think it's key to really define the culture, and that's define a vision. What is it that we do? Define a purpose. Why do we do it? And then figure out what's unique about yourself, your company, that's going to attract people, and then create the right processes to make those determinations on whether or not there's a fit.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, for us at Facebook, I think it is a balance, but I think in a lot of cases, it's actually almost easier to find someone with the right skill set and harder to find somebody with the right culture fit. I think there are actually a lot of really talented, accomplished people out there, and finding the ones who are, exactly the right fit for your company in your role is sometimes the harder part. So we do, in some roles, do a lot of the, lots of interviews. We have 8 to 10 interviews in some cases, particularly on the business side. Less so in engineering, where it's a much more structured process. But on the engineering side, we have one interview. The Jedi interview, we call it, which is entirely about culture fit. So you're literally spending, half an hour with somebody who is just assessing you for culture as a candidate. So that's a really important part of our process, and there have been lots of people that we've turned away because the Jedi didn't go well.
Culture can be a term that's very difficult to define, especially when you're an organization that's just defining your business and understanding what makes you tick from a cultural standpoint. So can you talk a little bit about how specifically you're able to assess whether someone is a culture fit? How do you know if they're a culture fit, and what are the things that you do to assess that?
Sure. So when we developed our 10 core values, many of them are fairly common and may exist in your organizations too. Some of them are a little off the wall. For example, to be fun and a little weird is one of our core values. But we just really spent a lot of time talking about what does that mean to be fun, a little weird, and why is that important to our culture, and how has it helped us to be successful. And then once you understand exactly what each of those core values means for your organization, then you can come up with interview questions that will help you determine if the person is a fit in that particular area. So one of the questions we ask in relation to that core value would be, on a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you? And it's a question that elicits one of two responses from candidates, and really that's what we're looking for, is their how they react to the question, not really their number. So there is no, if someone says 4, they're not hired. If they say 6, then they are hired. But the candidate who laughs because it's a silly question and they're not expecting it, and can kind of roll with, well, I think I'm a 3, and this is why, versus the person who gets angry and starts kind of debating with us, well, what do you mean by weird? And let's pull out the dictionary and see what that actually means, and that kind of thing. That person's not going to be happy at Zappos. That they're not going to be happy in our culture, because we are such a loose environment, and we expect people to be able to kind of roll with crazy things that happen in the office. So just, whatever your culture might be, and the Zappos culture certainly isn't for everybody and doesn't work for every candidate, but whatever yours is, if you can really understand for yourselves what each of those values are that are important, and then just come up with questions that will help you assess whether or not the person's going to match those particular values.
Please give us an example of a time recently when you have moved very fast on a project or a product without having full, understanding of the data or knowledge of exactly what it is you're working on. Give us an example of that. Or can you give us an example of a time when you built something that was different from what was already there because you were just trying to make it better? Or, these kinds of questions that sort of get at move fast, be bold, do things differently, try something new. And sometimes people are stumped because they just haven't done any of that, and that tells you something, because either people behave that way in the workplace or they don't, no matter where they are or what kind of environment they're in. And then there are also parts of the process that are more experiential. So for us, our engineers all go through a 6-week boot camp, no matter whether you're a new grad or you're joining as an eng leader. And so we tell people very early in the process, we expect you to code. No matter what job you're in, you're going to be kind of a doer. This is very much a doer, entrepreneurial hacker culture. And you'll be going through a 6-week boot camp when you start, and you don't know exactly which team you're going to join at the end of it. And the 6-week boot camp is all about fixing bugs and getting to know the code base and learning what it's like to be at Facebook. And we have a lot of people who, particularly leadership that you'll talk to, who say, I don't actually code anymore in my job, or I'm not going through boot camp. That seems ridiculous. I'm joining to lead a team, and right away we sort of move on pretty quickly from those relationships and just explain to them that it's very much part of who we are, and that's part of the process, and it is what it is, and that part doesn't change. So literally every engineer at Facebook has gone through boot camp. And I think it's really telling the way people react to those, because you can also tell when somebody is sort of willing to do it because they want the job versus they think it's kind of cool and they think it's kind of a neat thing. And you can read that in the interview, and you can make decisions based on that too. And then the other part of the interview process that I think is really telling is sort of the typical "do you have any questions for me" portion of the interview, where people will ask things that just throw up a big red flag. So, I think particularly if I'm meeting with somebody on the business side for a business side leadership role, and the question that they ask me, and this does happen, is, can you tell me what the budget and the headcount are going to be for this role next year? And I immediately know that that's not going to work, because we're not a place that, it's sort of about hierarchy, and we don't measure success by the size of your team, and, I really want to know what results you're going to deliver. And I've actually said to people in interviews, if that's what's important to you, you're not going to have fun at Facebook. It's not going to be the right place for you. So I think, you can use every part of your process to evaluate this along the way, and you just have to make sure that the people who are interacting with the candidates at each of those steps is watching for the right signs along the way.
Great, thank you.
I would just add one thing to what Lori said, because I think it's the most important thing throughout the interview process, is that you clearly define the roles of the interviewers so that everybody understands their role in the process and the things that they should be or should not be filtering for. I think too often companies fall into the trap of they throw 3 engineers into a room because that's their team, and expect them to make a good cultural decision when they're not even sure what the culture is, make a decision on technology or aptitude, when they're not sure what they're screening for because they haven't done it before. So what I've seen work extremely well is really close to what Lori had said, was to make sure that you understand the roles of each of the interviewers in the process. And if that's one interviewer, make sure that you know at the end of that interview what that person is to get out of the interview. And if you do that and you set it up in a structure where somebody comes through and interviews with 3 or 4 people, you're not asking the same questions 3 or 4 times. You're getting different perspectives on different things that are important to you as you grow as a company. I think companies that set it up that way and get, nobody likes process, but it's very important, especially because my opinion would be that your first 3 to 6 hires are the most important hires you'll ever make. And if you don't set a little bit of process and expectations in that stage, you're going to set yourself up for challenges and problems down the road.
Thank you.
I just want to add on to something that Lori said too, in regards to the actual interview itself maybe not being honestly the strongest place to determine whether or not someone's a culture fit, and that many steps along the way of the interview process can help you assess if someone's going to be a fit. And for us, every candidate that comes through gets a tour of our office, and you can totally see visual cues, and based on questions they ask during the tour, if people are happy about what they're seeing in a very open, loud, chaotic environment, or if they're terrified by what they're seeing. And so that's really a good clue in right at kind of on that first stage as well. And really making sure that you show your culture to the candidate in every step of the process. So for your job descriptions, if you are a fun, outgoing type of environment, does your job description read like every other boring bullet-pointed job description, or does it reflect your culture? Does your application reflect your culture? Like every step of the way, because I've had candidates self-select out just from us asking if they could be a superhero, who would they be and why on the application, because they were offended by that question or thought it was silly. And so, we save time in interviewing because we're stopping the process earlier rather than later. Also, when we have someone come on site for outside of the interview, I think the next biggest piece for us assessing culture fit is to get the person in a social type of setting. So we always incorporate a lunch, which most of the team that the person's interviewing with attends, or a happy hour or a dinner, to see how they are outside of kind of a poised interview situation.
I think one other thing that's not as intuitive that we sort of like to include in our process is when people ask us, what's it like to work at Facebook, or what's the culture, we use descriptors that are really going to turn some people away. So I would even describe them as repellent, because I do want people to self-select out. It's a lot easier for me if somebody says this is just not for me early on, because then the team doesn't have to spend a lot of time with them to figure it out. So, one example is, we'll say, in a response to that question, well, we expect you to have an impact from your very first day. It's not that you will have an opportunity to make an impact, because who doesn't want that? But we actually expect that on your very first day you will have an impact, and that within your first week you're going to ship code. And for a lot of people, that's sort of too much pressure for them, or they're not as interested in sort of moving that quickly or that pace. And they'll sort of very shortly thereafter raise their hands and say, I think I'm going to stay at my current company for a while longer. So I think it's sort of not intuitive because you're chasing people away from the process, but I think that's part of what you want to do in your process, is chase people away who aren't going to be right for you long term.
Great, thanks. So I want to thank all of our speakers today for their insights, and all of you for listening.